Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening. It's so nice to be here with you today. And as we promised during our first webinar with champions and mentors, we committed to organize skills development webinars only for these groups from our new champions and mentors. And we are happy to salute you and greet you to our first webinar, special dedication for our 2016-2017 Champions for Change and mentors and advisors. During our first Empower Women webinar, we kindly ask you to respond at what topics are most interested for you, and one of the most voted was the monitoring and evaluation. So how you can evaluate your work, how you can report about this. So today let's discuss more in details about the topic. My name is Diana and I will be moderating the webinar, and we will be happy together with a panelist to respond to your questions, and hopefully you will get all the answers possible and we will have a fun time and educational time together. Our agenda is very simple. We will start with some greetings and introduction. We will follow with a presentation number 1, some Q&A on this particular presentation. Afterwards, presentation number 2, some Q&A for that particular presentation, and then we will start the general question and answer series. As usual, if you have any questions and you want to, post them during the webinar, please do that via the question and answers box. Otherwise, you can also raise your hand after the presentation and just speak loudly and we will try to address the question. So today we have two wonderful women with us, also very interesting presenters, and you'll have a minute, the opportunity to find out about this. We have Nina Retzlaff, the expert in monitoring and evaluation, and Nelly Andrade, also working in monitoring and evaluation and development as well. You will find a little bit more about Nina and Nelly in 1 minute, but just want to stop for a little moment and pose a question. So why we need to monitor, why we need to evaluate, why it's useful for me as a champion for change, why I should care as a mentor. Maybe it's more important to guide the champion to realize, to make it happen, the project, and monitoring and evaluation, maybe not so. Maybe it brings additional value, but not so. We will ask Nina and Nelly to be specific about this and to basically bring you on the table why it's good for your work together in partnership as a team, Champion for Change team, and individual. And you know, when I think about the evaluation, I always go to Albert Einstein quote. He always used to say, everything that can be counted does not necessarily count. Everything that counts cannot necessarily be counted. Wise words indeed, and let's see what's the meaning particularly for us in the case of empowerment driving change, and in case of you actors, change makers on the ground. So we will start with our first panelist. Nina Retzlaff has a master's degree in political sciences from the University of Cologne, Germany, and a postgraduate diploma in development cooperation from University Politècnica de Catalunya, Barcelona. She currently works as a program manager and senior consultant at CAD in promoting, managing, monitoring, and evaluating partnership for development, sustainable development based on pyramid approaches, financial inclusion, and sustainable private sector development. I will leave Nina the opportunity to speak a little bit about herself, but I will just say that we had the opportunity and the pleasure to partner with Kat, Nina, and the team during our Empower Women Phase 1 evaluation. It was a great pleasure to work with Nina and the team because they understood in details what Empower Women did, but most importantly, they advised us wisely how to go forward with our evaluation. And to be frank, one point mentioned by the evaluation was that we need to, as a team, together with champions and mentors, to evaluate more our common projects because they are so important for community, for the change we are doing, and sometimes we are lacking this information. So I will give now the mic to Nina, and she will share her presentation and her thoughts with us. Nina, welcome.
Thank you very much, Diana. And hello, everyone. It's nice to meet you virtually. And yeah, a warm welcome to the new champions of Empower Women and also to the mentors that connected today. Yeah, as Diana said already, I don't want to spend so much time really talking about myself. If you have specific questions to me afterwards, I'm happy to answer that. But let's jump into the topic. As Diana said, I have as one of my main working areas evaluation of projects and programs in the development cooperation field. So I've been working with a lot of international organizations, UN agencies, but also others on looking at their different projects and programs and to see really what has been achieved, what results were created, and how projects and programs can be improved, basically. And with that, it's actually already mentioning a little bit the essence of what monitoring and evaluation really means. If we can move to the next slide. So I want to very briefly give you a short introduction to this concept of M&E, very briefly only. I could talk for hours about that because there are a lot of different aspects to it, but we don't have that much time, unfortunately, today. Let you know a little bit my view on yeah, why M&E is so important, and especially the indicators that you can select for monitoring your initiatives, how to select your indicator goals, some best practice tips, and yeah, what you can really measure. As Diana mentioned in the beginning, it's actually really true what Einstein said. You can't measure probably everything that is important, and then there are important things yeah, that need to be included, but you need to be sometimes a little bit more creative to see how you can really capture all of the initiatives, aspects, and the results that have been created. So we are going to briefly cover all of that in the next few minutes, 10 to 15 minutes, I think I have time. So on M&E, so if you work with projects, and especially the kind of projects that Empower Women wants to promote and foster through advocating for women's economic empowerment, which relates to the development cooperation field as well, of course. M&E is one of the main concepts that is always related to project and program management, because it is really an integral part. When you are defining a project, when you are developing the project design, your different activities in your project, it's always related already to establishing also, indicators on what you really want to achieve, and there we already go into monitoring, because it's really defining the different steps that you're going to take in your project and how you're going to measure the success of your activities. So monitoring overall can be defined as an ongoing and systematic collection of information on your project's implementation, and that can be on a weekly basis or a monthly or quarterly basis or even an annual basis if you have longer programs. I think in your cases, as you are champions, I think for usually 6 months, it would be probably better to do some monthly collection of data, for example, so that you at the end can really say, okay, I did this and this and that in this specific order, and that has resulted in the following effects, for example. And then compared to monitoring, we also have evaluation, which the difference is a little bit that evaluation takes place at a certain point in time. So whereas monitoring is really an ongoing data collection, evaluation means to look at the implementation of a project. Mostly this is done at the end of a project, but you have also midterm evaluations where you stop in the middle of the project and look at what has been happening, and then you try to find out if you are on track and if you have successfully created your results already, or if you have to change maybe the project design or certain activities that you are implementing. So basically monitoring and evaluation helps you to find out if your activities really produce the results that you have been expecting to produce through your initiatives. And that is why it's really so important, because if you don't monitor what you do, you can easily, continue implementing your activities, but you will never find out if you have really created the results that you wanted to create. So I am a strong advocate for having some monitoring and evaluation aspects always integrated into projects. And if we can move on to the next slide. As I have already mentioned, monitoring really starts when you define your project activities. So let's say basically if you do an initiative or a project, it's basically always to change some kind of situation, right? So usually you find yourself with a certain situation that you might not approve, so you think you have to change something about that, and then you define certain activities that can lead to a change. That is usually a project, that is a specific initiative that takes place during a defined time period. And then the expectation is that the situation from point A has moved to point B, basically. So when you define your initiatives, you have already the opportunity to think about, what could be indicators, how can I really measure my success? How can I find out if I really have achieved what I wanted to achieve? And then you have the opportunity also through the process of the project implementation to continuously analyze what you have done and to really see if you have been successful, and if you find out that you have not been successful or that you have not achieved what you wanted to achieve, then you can correct your project and say, okay, this time I will do it differently because it has not really worked out, so I will try to try a different approach and see if it works better next time. So it's a continuous learning process really that you can achieve through monitoring and evaluation. And so it really serves different purposes. On the one hand, you can assess your own performance, as I said, your success with your activities. And of course, if you have the data, then you can also showcase them. So once you have really collected some data, let's say you have done a workshop with women on, let's say, maybe bookkeeping for women that are illiterate, or that you wanted to support in creating small businesses or anything that leads to any economic activity, then you can say, okay, I have, for example, implemented 3 workshops with, 40 women, and they have learned specific aspects about business management or about bookkeeping or whatever. And through my workshop, these women have then successfully been able to, starting their own income-generating activities, for example. So, and you can then quantify that and say, I have really achieved this and this and that. Just instead of just saying, I have done these workshops with these women and I think they went fine, you can then really prove, okay, I have really created some change in the lives of these women, and I have helped them to better manage their own lives and to earn some income. So that is like, you can highlight these achievements and also, for example, put it into your CV for your future job applications and say, these were my achievements through this project that I have been implementing. And on the other hand, it also, of course, helps you to learn for yourselves what kind of initiatives work and maybe what aspects are not really working, so you can understand and learn from this implementation and the monitoring of your implementation. You can also learn a lot about the people that you work with. So of course that depends a lot on what kind of initiatives you are planning. Some of you might develop offline activities, as I mentioned, some workshops or other offline initiatives. Some of you might opt to do online campaigning or other online activities, blogging, writing articles, and do more more communication. But depending on each initiative, you can always learn through monitoring your activities and to see what has really come out of it. And then, of course, you can share your knowledge with others, and they can learn from you, and you can also then learn from them, from the feedback that you receive, and that can always only lead to the improvement of any project through knowledge sharing. Can we move on? So when you think about indicators for your projects or initiatives, you can always think about the SMART indicators. That is like a best practice from monitoring and evaluation. Indicators should usually be specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-based. So that is true, first of all, for quantitative indicators that you can collect. So we have quantitative indicators on the one hand. There are also more qualitative indicators that cannot be measured in such a rigid way as the quantitative ones, but we can come back to that a little bit later. So the SMART indicators are mostly quantitative indicators. And just a few examples. I mean, the important thing about indicators is that you make them really specific so that you can define certain numbers. I have put some examples here. So for example, if you want to implement workshops, you say, okay, what number of participants do I want to achieve? Over which time period am I going to implement my workshops, for example? Or if I do a Twitter campaign, I can say, okay, my goal is I want to reach 10,000 people in 5 months through my Twitter activities. Or if you are a blogger, and you advocate for women's economic empowerment online, you can also say, okay, my goal is I will each week publish a new article. And then you can, of course, also further measure, so how many people have read my article, how many likes do I have for my article, and so on. So you can measure a little bit the outreach that you have created with your online activities. Can we move on? On the other hand, so once you have defined these kinds of indicators, as I said, through project implementation, you should of course also then really collect data on these different indicators, and you should, I think, when you now start to think about what kind of initiatives you implement, in the design of your initiatives, where you define really, so what am I going to do, where am I going to do it, how am I going to do it, and with whom. This is like the process that you're going to implement, and there you should already define your indicators that you can then collect data against. So you would define, okay, what number and what type of activities am I going to do. Maybe you will also create some partnerships with maybe a local NGO or a media company or something like that, depending on what kind of initiative you want to do. You would maybe set a goal for the number of participants or the number of people that you want to reach, and so on. So I would recommend you to think about that in the first place. And then you can also think about what kind of results do I want to achieve, and how can you measure that in the end. So of course, if you do workshops or do any other offline activities, you could, for example, measure the satisfaction of participants through implementing like a very short survey at the end of your initiative. And then your goal could be, okay, I want to have 80% satisfaction rate or something like this. If you do online activities, you could establish results in terms of, the media coverage that you receive. Also, maybe for offline, it could be that you get coverage in media. But online, then you could say, okay, I want to reach a certain number of shares or likes in social media, and so on. And and then more long-term effects that you could create. So you could also, if you wanted to, that already is a little bit more related to evaluation in the end, because it's not the monitoring of an ongoing project activity, but rather looking at the effects that you create through your initiatives at the end. You could talk to, for example, people of the community that you have worked with, or the online community that you're in contact with, your networks, and also do maybe an online survey. There are like very easy to use tools available that at no cost online, where you could send out a short survey or something like that to see, you know, have I really changed something? Have I, for example, contributed to people in my community being more aware of women's economic empowerment, or, for example, if you have implemented maybe a campaign in your company, or a capacity building in your company, have people really, you know, learned something through that, and has anything changed? And then, yeah, as I said before, you can do that quantitatively, but then, as Diana mentioned in the beginning, some things that can't really be counted. So you can also be creative when you do monitoring. And you can think about, you know, what can I do apart from just, you know, showing numbers? Can I do something else to highlight my results or my activities? So you could do storytelling, you know, publishing articles. You can maybe do a picture story or produce a video, for example, on your activities. And there are many other possibilities, and maybe some of you already have some experience. I'm not sure, of course, what profiles each of you has, but I don't know if anyone maybe wants to share something that he or she has done already in the past regarding monitoring and evaluation, wants to share that with us. And on the other hand, I'm also open for questions, any kind of doubts or questions that you have. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Nina. Very, very thorough and, you know, very rich presentation. I'm sure we will have a lot of what to digest and what to take with us. But I think the most important point that you mentioned is whatever we want to bring on the table, it's important to have twofold: the evaluation for us and for the purpose, for the stakeholders that we did this activity. So we do have the first question, and if you are okay, and if Nelly is okay with this, let's maybe start with some question on your particular presentation, and then we will go to the second presentation. So the first question comes from Zarina, which is our new champion for change, new meaning with tenure. So her question is, which kind of tools we can use during monitoring?
Okay, so I would say, you know, it doesn't have to be very complicated, so I would keep it actually as simple as you can. And I would recommend really to use very simple tools such as Excel files. So you could create a table, for example, let's say you want to, yeah, you're doing a campaign, for example, and you want to monitor, for example, the Facebook posts that you have done, or the tweets, or the articles that you have published. So you can just simply create a table in Excel, and you can organize that through time. So you put the months or the weeks, and then you can, you know, basically monitor how many articles you've published, how many tweets you've done. You can even also, you know, put in the qualitative information about the topic that you have published, and then you can collect information. So maybe in the first week or second week or third week, so how many likes have I received, or how many shares have I achieved, how much outreach have I received with my publications, and so forth. So you would have to define, as I said before, your specific indicators that you want to measure, and then I would just put them into an Excel, and Excel then allows you also later on, if you want to do some nice visualization, so you can produce some graphics if you want to, you know, produce a short report or something like that. You have that all handy in one document.
Thank
So I wouldn't recommend really to do something very much more complicated. Of course, if you do like huge program evaluations, then there are other tools also available, but for the purpose, I think, of your initiatives, I would keep it simple.
Thank you, Nina. Our mentor, Karen, former champion alumni, wanted to compliment you. She says beautifully and succinctly presentation. Thank you. Louise, our champion for change, is asking the following question. Can drawing and painting be an effective way of evaluation to see if a person got the idea or the concept?
Yes, I would say yes. That would be one of the creative means of evaluation. So, and I think it's specifically useful, for example, if you work with children or maybe also with communities that have very low education levels and maybe that are illiterate, and then you cannot do any written, you cannot possibly implement, for example, any online survey with them. So you could go to the community and do a workshop, and then like a monitoring or evaluation workshop with them and ask them maybe, for example, to draw pictures on certain concepts. So that is a valuable and valid tool that is also used in evaluation in development cooperation. As I
And
said, especially with communities that are illiterate or with children.
yeah, and I think I want to add an example here. In 2014, our champion from Italy, Chiara, her project was to organize a series of presentations about the gender equality, gender gap in STEM and just women economic empowerment in school because she is a teacher and so she did this in her ICT class in school. But at the end, she also organized a drawing contest. I draw to empower women. So, and the contest was a great way to see, what was the message brought by Cara in her presentation. And we can share the blog that she wrote afterwards and with drawings, particular drawings. And it's a very interesting and indeed innovative and pleasant way to evaluate. So it was a nice project and a nice way to evaluate as well. We'll be happy to share. Rejoice is saying, thank you for the presentation, short and at the point. I have always wondered what indicators are and how to set them in your presentation. And thank you for clarifying this to me. My question is, when setting the indicators, how do you know how to set the targets, for example? How do you know whether to set the target at 100 tweets, likes, or 1,000 tweet likes?
That is a very good question. And I would say there is no fixed, of course, there is no fixed number that you have to put in there. It is a little bit based, of course, on experience. So, of course, if it's your very first project, you might be a little bit more lost than if you have already implemented some campaigns or workshops. So what I would recommend maybe is you could do some research online if you find any benchmarking. So benchmarking is, the comparison with other projects that other people have implemented. And also related to the SMART indicators that I mentioned before, you have to stay realistic, So I would maybe suggest that if it's your first project, rather keep your indicators a little bit lower than aiming too high, because it doesn't make sense, to say, okay, I want to reach 1 million people when in the end maybe you reach 1,000. So try to find out a little bit before you start implementing, try to find out the potential of your initiative by doing research on similar projects, and maybe you find, some benchmarking that you can then take as a suggestion for your own indicators, I would say. And maybe if you are working in teams, you can also, of course, discuss, and maybe somebody knows something. So it's always like a matter of experience and learning.
I agree. To the previous example and question regarding the drawing and the innovative way of evaluation, Alexandra Sasha Bayer has a comment. Art has been used as activism for centuries, but could be an interesting project to then share on social media for quantitative measures. So I would agree with that, and we are happy to share the links in the follow-up email, as I mentioned below. For a previous project similar with that, given an example by Nina and which referred to the question. An interesting question, how can a mentor be sure she is effective at mentoring?
Yes, a good question. I would say, I mean, yeah, this is a new concept that has just been introduced now. So you are like the first mentors of Empower Women. So of course, you can also think about your goals when you are mentoring the new champion. So what do you want to achieve through the mentorship? I would say, what activities are you actually implementing to guide or to help the new champions to implement their activities? So you should think about that. Maybe you can also do that in a group with the other mentors and see, okay, what are our goals? How can we really do some monitoring of what we are doing and how we are doing it, so that we also have a certain quality of our mentoring. And then in the end, of course, you can do a little evaluation with the champions that you have been mentoring and see how satisfied they are with your support, I should say.
Yes, indeed.
I don't know, Diana, if
Yes.
you have other ideas.
You know, we do have a challenge, but a beautiful challenge this year. We started the mentorship project mainly because our Champions alumni wanted to be in continuously involved, and also because we had a lot of requests for the championship project, and we thought these two could be matched. But I think the mentors, you know, the main purpose of the mentors is to guideline, you know, the realization of a project. And for me, I see that the best way to guide is to refer through examples, through study case. This is what I did. This is what I evaluate. This is what I spoke. This is what I, so through examples. And then together work on the new project for the champion. If the champion, you know, at the end of a March, will succeed to have that presentation with 5 or with 10 or with 20 people, depends on the case. If a message was received, if you know the if I don't know, the quote after the meeting said, "I am happy to know about this concept. I'm happy that you came." I think this is a great indication. Sometimes we are looking for indicators that maybe is too abstract or too ambitious for us. I always advise my champions, my mentors, that I am a focal point. Just be real, be simple about this. Don't expect too much. Enjoy what you are doing. And if one person is happy as a result of your presentation, this is also a good result. So I think this should be our approach. Nina, we do have a lot of questions, a lot of questions. Let's
If you want.
let's take two more and then to go the second presentation, and then we will take additional one. So because the
Okay.
second presentation goes a lot with a practical example how you can monitor, and I think it will be helpful for both mentors and champions. Um, Zanele says, "Thank you for the presentation. I will be dealing with the primary school girls, and most of the question has been asked. I'm getting a lot of ideas. We are so happy for this." Question from Doris. "I have written a script for documentary and how as women mothers and our actions, language, mindset impact our children in their next generation." with this as a long-term project, how do we measure and evaluate with the media? So basically, if anyone has a short movie or a clip or a video, how is best to assign indicators and evaluate this?
Well, that depends on what you want to achieve with your short movie, right? So I think it's quite ambitious to say that you can measure maybe a change of mindsets or something like that, because that would be very difficult to measure. So I would not recommend that. You might be able to, for example, if you do smaller presentations of this short film, I'm not sure in how far you have planned that. Maybe you can organize some events and you invite maybe 20 people and you show them the video, and then afterwards you could ask them some questions and have a discussion with them on the video and see what the reactions are, and if people have learned something from the video, for example. But to really do a very quantitative analysis of the effects of a video, I would say that is very, very ambitious, because that is methodologically quite complex. Because you would have to, I don't know, don't want to go too much into detail, but you would have to have some kind of, as we call it, a control group of people that don't see the video, and then you compare that to the people that saw the video, and it's very like sociological research, let's say it like this. So it's very complicated, yeah. But with a smaller closed group, you can do something more qualitative, I would say, through discussions and through, speaking to the people directly.
I think one question that is more theoretical but useful to know for our champions. Hi Nina, thanks for the briefs. What is the difference between monitoring, evaluation and impact metrics? Maybe you can briefly address this, Nina.
Yeah, very briefly. I mean, that's also like a complex topic, so I don't want to bore you with so much methodology, but so impact is a specific form of evaluation. So when I said at the beginning there is monitoring and then there's evaluation, if we go deeper into the topic of evaluation, there are many, many different forms of evaluation. So, and one specific form of evaluation is impact evaluation. And that is also quite complex to do because it requires very rigid methodologies and is usually applied to projects in a very rigid and scientific and quantitative manner. So I'm not sure if you are interested in implementing some kind of impact assessment, but if you want to learn more about that and different kinds of evaluations that you can do, I would recommend a website actually that is called betterevaluation.org. So there you can learn about different methodologies for evaluation, more quantitative approaches or more qualitative approaches, different kinds of tools and methodologies that you can implement. But that is really related only to evaluation but not to monitoring. And I think for your specific initiatives as champions, I would first maybe think about monitoring what you're doing, and then at the end, yes, you can implement also evaluations, but I think the monitoring part would first of all be important to do. Because also without monitoring, it's hard to evaluate in the end, because the data for evaluation are mostly generated through continuous monitoring activities. So one goes hand in hand with the other.
Indeed. Thank you, Nina. We will share in the follow-up email as well with a recording and the presentation, the suggested resource by Nina. Sabine is also mentioning that I would also say be focused in terms of audience. Reach your community first and then expand on that. And I couldn't agree more. We will stop with a question for a bit to go for the second presentation. And here we will have Nelly Andrade. I am happy to welcome Nelly today because she is our 2016 champion alumni. Currently a mentor as well. In her professional life, she is a lead of Hult Prize Foundation in Mexico, where on top of overseeing its operation, she is conducting its first process evaluation globally and locally. She's worked with different organizations like Coca-Cola, American Consulate in Mexico, and so on and so forth. You can see her resume and her bio. But most of all, I would like to say that I was happy to work with Nelly as I was her focal point. We did several small projects, and I kindly asked Nelly to speak about her story project and the approach to evaluation and monitoring she took, as it was a very successful one. So I'm happy to welcome Nelly, um, and I will give her the mic to continue with her presentation.
Hi everybody, I'm super happy to be here today. As Diana mentioned before, I'm a former champion, so I'm super excited to see all of your projects, and I'm currently a mentor, so I have the amazing opportunity to be working together with some super incredible champions. So as Diana said also, today I'm going to talk a little bit about one specific project that I work with several other former champions now, and I think all of them are current mentors, so it's super exciting also that everyone is still super engaged with the movement. So specifically it's going to be about the Her Story event I organized here in Mexico. I did it in Mexico City, another champion made it in Monterrey, and well, you're going to see a little bit about that in the next slides. So we can go to the other one. So first, I wanted to start with what is monitoring and evaluation. Nina has given an amazing explanation, so I decided only to give from my personal opinion and my personal experience, what I think it's super valuable. If we go to the next slide, what I've seen from my experience is that when you conduct first monitoring and then an evaluation process, the whole process is super enriching, and what at the end it involves a lot of learning. So at the very end, what I feel it means is that you're using the knowledge you have now with all of the data and all of the information to make your current programs or your future programs even better. So it's super, super important for that. And the second thing is that it really helps you identify sometimes even exactly what is it that it's working with a specific program or a project, and understand better how you can use that specific thing that is working a lot to scale the success or the impact, or even get it to different markets, etc. If we go to the next slide, please. So what I did in my project, and I'm going to talk to you about it in a little bit more, is that I tried to divide it in 4 different steps. So starting from the very beginning, that is defining the problem. So Nina was saying before, like, what is it that you don't like that it's working and you want to change it? That is basically to define what is the problem that you're trying to solve, because you don't want to do programs or projects that are not needed, right? And then what I did is to make to see in theory how is it that the program is going to fix the problem that you said before. Then I went a little bit more into the monitoring aspect, the process evaluation, which is the data that I started to collect as the program was ongoing, to see, and then I was when I was doing this process, I was seeing if what I expected that was going to be happening was actually happening, and if it was working how I thought it would be. I'm going into more detail in the following slides, don't worry. And at the very end, what I tried to see with the impact evaluation is if the goals that I was hoping were achieved, and what was the impact of the program, and if it worked, and what was the magnitude of the program. We go to the next slide, please. So one of the projects that I did when I was in my time as a champion was an event with the campaign of Her Story. So everything started with an idea with a couple of I think we were 7 or 8 different champions, And we were lucky enough that it matched very well with a huge campaign that was taking place also with Wikimedia and the UN Envoy of Youth and UN Women. So it ended up being a huge event in New York, and then you could have like more local events in specific cities. So I organized the one in Mexico City. Another colleague of mine made one in Monterrey, and there were others in Cairo and in many other cities. So we put some of the digital posters here so you could see them. Here's one picture of the event I did in Mexico City. And well, in order to make the very simple evaluation process for this specific project, first I defined the problem. And in this case, what I defined is that there was not enough recognition of the contribution of women through history, and that a gender knowledge gap was existing, at least here in Mexico City. Now, before continuing explaining all of this, I want to mention that this is like a very specific case for this project in Mexico City. So you don't have to go along the same specific process, and it doesn't have to look the same. This is like a very, very specific thing that I did for this project. So then after defining the problem, I defined now the objective of the project, which was to recognize the contribution of women through history by increasing the content on Wikipedia related to women and gender equality, in order to raise awareness of young women in all spheres. So what we were doing in this event was an editathon with Wikimedia Foundation, in which we were writing and uploading content of like women bios of super important women in history that are not yet on Wikipedia. Or, for example, we did something very specific for Mexico, and for example, we found out that the gold medal winning team of female soccer players was not in Wikipedia yet, and they won in the Olympics. So it was super surprising for the participants to actually find out that a lot of women were not even, I don't know, in one of the most visited websites on the internet, and I mean they were really recognized globally, right? So that was basically what we were doing on that specific day. We can go to the next slide. And then this is where you might think it gets a little bit complicated, but it's really simple. So I started putting exactly what, like in an order, what the things that I was going to use, and this helped me, like the logic model, to understand what information or what impact specifically I was hoping to find with my project. So first I started with the inputs, which is what resources I have available for me and what activities I was going to be doing. So for example, in resources, I had the support from Empower Women. There was a landing page, details of the event on their global website. We had the Wikimedia staff on site here in Mexico City helping us with the event. We had an online tutorial with Wikimedia that trained us to be able to actually edit things on Wikipedia and then teach the participants during the event to do the same thing. We had a physical space. We were able to have a co-working space for free to make the event, and we had volunteers. So these are all of the resources that I have. Then I put in specifics what activities we're going to be doing. So I had to do the creation of the event, the send of invitations. I had to recruit volunteers, to do a volunteer training, to prepare material, and to do the training of Wikipedia. Then the specific output in this very specific project was only one, because it was the event per se. So it was, the output is the Her Story editathon in Mexico City, and then I put my short-term outcomes that I'm expecting, the intermediate outcomes that I was expecting, and the long-term outcomes that I was also expecting. So here, since it was only a one-time event, my long-term outcome was of maybe 1.5, 2 months. My short-term outcome was during that same day, and my intermediate outcome was after the event. So what I was expecting to happen in that moment was, or during the event at least, is that participants were aware of the gender gap present, at least in Mexico City. that the participants were aware of the fact that there is not enough recognition of the contribution of women through history. And then the intermediate outcomes that I was expecting was that the participants would share their experience with their close community, that the participants would become advocates of gender equality by participating in one or more events, either with Empower Women or with Wikimedia Foundation, or at least to share in a more frequent way content about, like on social media or other platforms or other organizations or any other, about these topics. And then in a long-term outcome, I was expecting them to become active members of the editathons here in Mexico City, because the Wikimedia Foundation has lots of events here in Mexico City, for them to become members of Empower Women or any other movement around gender equality around the world. We can go to the next one, please. Okay, so what I decided to do is that I made a couple of questions. This picture is of the editathon that was taking place in Monterrey. The girl very, very to the right with the white blouse, she is Monica, and she was also a former champion from Mexico based in Monterrey, so she was the one that organized that one. And it was taking place in my university, in Tec de Monterrey. But well, so what I did to actually see if what I was expecting was happening or did happen is that I made a specific set of questions for this project. So I did some questions to ask before the event started, before their experience, then some of them after the event, and then I had others sent out to them like 1.5 months, almost 2 months after their experience. Also, this is very specific to this specific project, so it doesn't have to be the same for yours. I just want to remind that. So, sorry, one slide before, please, where I can see there. So these were the questions that I asked. So, for example, the set of questions that I was asking them before and after, most of them are just the same. Like, do you think there's a misrepresentation of women in history? Do you think there is a gender knowledge gap? Do you know what is Empower Women? Do you identify yourself as an advocate for gender equality? Or do you think initiatives to close the gender knowledge gap are necessary? I asked all of those questions after the event, and I added some others, like, would you be interested in participating in other activities? Would you be interested in being part of Empower Women? And then after 1.5 months, I asked two very simple questions. If they had registered to Empower Women as a member, or if they had attended any other event of Wikimedia. So Wikimedia, what they do here in Mexico is that, for example, they do a sports editathon of women, and then you go and only write about bios of super important women that are not yet in Wikipedia and that you want to expose or make the people know that they have done important things also. So they do of culture, of movies, etc. So I wanted to know if they were attending any other events. So some of the results is that before the event, like from 30 to 40% of the participants thought that there was a representation of women in history, or thought that that a knowledge gap exists, or they identify themselves as advocates of gender equality. And what was super surprising for me is that after the event, I mean, I know that just after the event, probably they're super excited, so they tend to be more, to show a bigger difference, but still it's an important thing to do just after, especially if it's like a strong experience that they're living with your project or your program. So after the event, almost all of the participants thought that there actually exists a misrepresentation of women in history, and almost all of the participants identified themselves as advocates for gender equality then, and at least half registered on the Empower Women website, and like 60% of them continue to participate in at least one or more event organized like by the Wikimedia Foundation. So with this data, it's easier for you to communicate what is it that you're doing, who, for example, in case we want to do it again, I would have like important information to show that actually it does make women more aware of the situation, and that they really get more engaged after participating in one of these events. So it helps you a lot also to not only to communicate but to help you get more resources for funding in case you want to do it in a bigger place or with maybe some food and beverage and things like that. Can we go to the next one? So I wanted, and again, my project was an offline project, so I was I mean, in person with the volunteers doing things on the ground, but I also wanted to add something if the project was online. I know that Nina gave some super, super good insights about this, and I wanted to add some others. So there's two different things. Maybe some of you know them, maybe some of you don't. But Facebook has, they're called audience insights as well as Instagram. So I know that in Instagram it only works if you have like a business profile or if you have promoted posts, but I think that's something you want to consider in case you're going to do an online project with a campaign or something like that, so that you can actually see how like the reach of your posts more than the likes and how many shares. There's a special I don't know, like special indicator that Facebook and Instagram calculates, and it's kind of easy to see if you just Google Facebook audience insights and then try to read a little bit about it. I'm sure that you'll get very more comfortable in using it. And then the other one is that it might take a little bit more of time, but I think that if you're going to do in an online project, even if it's in social media, it's really important for you to measure conversations or the engagement of people. So as I said, this takes time and can be done manually. So this is like reading the comments, see what people are sharing, if they're inviting others to post, if they're sharing it with their friends, or if they're sharing it with nice quotes. So all of that things are easy to do, take time, but I think are really valuable when you're trying to have information about when you're in the monitoring phase. Can you go to the next one? I think, yeah. So finally, oh, no, one before. Yeah. So I did also a small list of the things that I think are, or the main things that I usually need to have a better sense of the reach of my project. Again, this is with my own personal project of last year, the Her Story Editathon. But I think that this may be a good start for you to have at least simple information ready for when you are going to start doing anything else. So I start with the name of the project, of the program, the problem that is solving, the main objective, the number of participants. It can be online or offline. In our event, we had a couple of people online that they couldn't be there on that day, but they connected through a live stream, and they decided to participate through their computers editing the profiles of the women. Then I put the location or venue. Again, if it's online, you can just put online. If you made specific or special alliances with somebody, so for example, we had a really good alliance with a co-working space that gave us for free their space, or with Wikimedia Foundation Mexico, which Diana was super happy to introduce us to. So they were physically there to help us with the event, and with Laboratoria, an NGO that works empowering women through tech education, and they helped us bringing all of their staff to the event. Then if you have special findings, so for example, on top of all the information that I collected and like the results I had, one thing that surprised me a lot is the huge lack of knowledge of the gender gap in Mexico, at least. Like people think, or at least the girls that went on that day, they couldn't believe that even like a female soccer winning Olympic team weren't in Wikipedia by then. And it's usually things that you don't see because you don't have them in your mind all of the time. But yeah, I mean, it was one of the things that surprised me a lot. And then at the end, if possible, have testimonials of 1 or 2. If it can be more, it's okay. But usually when you do a report, it's much better to have 1 or 2 testimonials of somebody that participated in the event. So I had this one of one girl, Laboratoria, that she said that I had no idea there was a real knowledge gap on the recognition of women in history in 2016. I was surprised even successful women in sports today are not recognized. I work in Laboratoria empowering women through coding, and still I didn't know it. So this can help you a lot, either to do another version of your program, or to do it again, or to ask for sponsors, or only to share with stakeholders. But I think it's very useful to have at least one testimonial. And I think, yeah, this is the last part of my presentation. Thank you very much. Let me know if you have any question.
Thank you so much, Nelly. This was very useful. Two things to remain after this presentation. First of all, you don't need always to have a new idea to implement it as your project. You can pick it up on some project that already been started. So in case of Nelly, she was also a part of a team, you know, who came up with this idea of a champion. Some of them we have today, Alexandra, Sabine, Clarissa, and excuse me if I don't mention all the names, it's just because I didn't look to all the attendees. But I know that, you know, the team proposed this idea, and we started to think how to conceptualize the campaign, and then continuingly the collaboration with Wikipedia, and we wanted to make it happen even at the bigger scale. So we decided that we will come with a gender lens approach to contribute to the Wikipedia Foundation and content and so on. So you know, just you pick it up, an existing idea, and you leverage it, implement it in the community. And then second point, that you monitor and evaluate as you go. So before, after, meanwhile, and if it's possible after 1.5 months, it's even more appreciative, because you know in a kind of more realistic terms what was the impact. Here are some questions for you. Karen says, great presentation, Nelly. Can the mentors meet and you know, sometimes share the ideas? I think, Karen, not everyone attends the CSW and it will be harder. This is a very specific event that's only organized for civil society, government representatives. Unfortunately, not of all the mentors are representatives of civil society, but in case mentors will come, we know about this and we will facilitate the connection as last time. And Nelly, here's a question for you. What may be the best strategy to persuade others to be part of the evaluation process?
Yeah, if I'm not sure if you're thinking about the participants to make them like interested in participating in the evaluation process, but at least in my case, what I did is that when they arrived, the first thing that they had to do is to register, right? So in the registration, I asked them to fill out these small questions. So I wasn't asking them to, if they were interested in participating in the evaluation, I just tell them that it was part of the registration and that answering those questions will help us do better events in the future. And they were like, oh yeah, without a problem. I mean, there are 4, 5 different small questions, so I'll do it. In my case, it was kind of easy because I was on site, on the ground, with them face to face. I think it might get a little bit more complicated when it's online, if you want to ask people to answer a specific survey. But I think the easiest way, if you're going to have like a project on the ground, is to include the questions or do it like one-to-one when they arrive, or when they are doing lunch or in a break, just to make sure that you have the input of the persons.
Thank you, Nelly. I think, yes, we This is also a participatory approach. Some of participants are a little bit hesitant at the beginning, you know, but I would advise the questions to be very simple, maybe with several, you know, options to answer, so that it will not be a burden, but rather an easy way to do. Betty mentions that it was a great study case. Thank you. And here is just to mention that her story campaign is still ongoing. We still are organizing events with Wikipedia, so it's an opportunity for you to engage in your community. So if you have more particular question about this, I'm sure Nelly will be happy to have a one-on-one meeting. Louise also says, thank you. Very insightful presentation. I liked the example, and Grace says that she has enjoyed as well the project and she is thinking to join it. We are happy. Another question I would say is mostly on the I don't know, on the monitoring side, but let's see, maybe you can share some insights. So can the champions plan an online project like motivating and encouraging women empowerment for blogging, but also implement it offline? Nelly, it's not a particular your presentation, but maybe you can share some ideas about this.
Yeah, can you repeat the very last part? So
Can the
I
champion, yeah,
listened very well.
can the champions
Uh-huh.
plan an online project and also take this online project offline?
Sure, I think it's actually quite feasible. My very first project actually was a tweetathon on Women's Day, and it was Women of Impact. So basically what I did that day is to have like women leaders on different areas, like in sports, arts, cinema, and I did hashtags like women in film, women in sports, and I started doing an online project, and it was really exciting. I mean, people were asking questions, they were answering, and women leaders continued to be engaged in gender equality topics. And even though that project was not completely related to the Her Story campaign after, most of the people that attended virtually the tweetathon in March then were interested or did attend the other one, which was offline. So I'd say that if champions have the capacity, I'd say it's a really good thing to complement a project online and offline, and I think it's completely feasible.
And Nina, Nelly, here's the final questions for I guess all of us, and I would kindly ask you both to respond with questions, and maybe if you want to share the final thoughts as we are approaching to close the webinar. So Ekaterina is asking, what if we are partnering with some organizations where, you know, volunteers, other champion, what role in the monitoring and evaluation can have that organization or can take when implementing the project? So basically, how we can monitor and evaluate in partnership with our partners or other co-organizers. Nina?
Yes, so from my point of view, it would not be very much different if you implement a project on your own or in a partnership. What you would have to do is to sit down with the people that you are collaborating with, and I would say together define your monitoring system. So define the indicators that you want to collect information on and how you're going to do that, which tools you're going to use, and what kind of information you need. And then you would have to define different roles of the different people that are involved in this partnership. I would say from my perspective it would be helpful if there is one person that is basically the monitoring manager, let's say it like this. So it should be under the control of one person that has the overall oversight of the whole data set that is going to be collected. But then different people can take on different roles in data collection. So maybe One person can do a discussion, like a discussion round with a number of participants in the community, for example, and then another person could implement a survey or something like that. So you could take on different roles. But and then what you can also, of course, do is evaluate or monitor a little bit the partnership itself. So that was also interesting. If you work with other people, other organizations together, many times it adds a lot of value to an initiative because you can increase the outreach or the impact that you can create. On the other hand, it's always also a little bit challenging, of course, because you have many different players in the initiative and you have to somehow coordinate and manage that. And you can also learn from this process of working together with other organizations and what works and what does not work in this process.
Thank you, Nina. Nelly?
Yeah, I think just as Nina says, there are some resources that you can sort of share. Like, for example, in my case, in order to do or to get the information 1.5 months later, what I did is that I was working together with Laboratoria, and through Laboratoria I asked them like, hey, can you share these questions with the participants I had from your organization? So they were the ones that helped me reach out to the participants again after the event. So that was super, super useful, and I think that, for example, if one of your partners is going to be on the ground, then you can give them, for example, after you design what type of information you want to get or what questions or the way you want to do it, they can, of course, maybe help you getting information from the people that you're working with or from the organizations. I think that there are different ways in which you can work. I definitely think it's super useful, and I think specifically for the part of gathering information, it might be even easier for you because you cannot be everywhere all the time. So if they're already in the place where you're planning to do your project, that's much better.
Thank you. I would like to thank Nina and Nelly for their time and for their wonderful presentation. We receive a lot of feedback. Everyone says that, you know, it's very useful. The presentation was thoughtful and a great example. And I think our champions and mentors are even more motivated to go over there and just make it happen. Thank you everyone for joining. Have a good day, evening, and see you in the next webinar. Goodbye.